Hello and welcome to the Business of Blockchain at the New York Stock Exchange. I'm Jane King, and today's episode is sponsored by BitDeer and explores the question, should AI be decentralized? And what does that entail? I'm joined by Michael Casey, former head of content at CoinDesk, advisor to the MIT Media Lab, Wall Street Journal columnist, and author of highly acclaimed books about the internet, cryptocurrency, and blockchain technology. So great to have you here.
It's lovely to be here, Jane. Great to see you again.
And you're on a mission to decentralize AI. So explain what that means.
Yeah, so we founded an organization called the Decentralized AI Society, and that is, it's working with a number of providers of what is an emerging technology stack that is focused on creating the right framework in which data and compute and all the pieces that go into the AI economy can be sort of provably private and can be respective of people's right to data and really build a much more collectively owned and participatory economy than the very centralized model that the current structure is, right?
Explain what's at stake. Why should people care?
Yeah. So you've probably heard, everyone talks about the age of agents right now.
Yeah.
Some people use the term agentic age. So we're moving into a world, supposedly, in which we will all have our own agents, probably a number of them, right? People are talking about billions of these agents out in the world. If that's the case, then we're going to be relying upon those agents to make every decision for us, right? The capabilities that we've been talking about already are very strong. Will they do our shopping for us? Will they place our financial bets for us? Will they interact with our doctors? Will they give us health advice? All of that information is incredibly sensitive. It's who you are. Your data in the digital age is you. So this is a question about owning yourself, right? An agent in the legal sense, and the agent can mean various things there's various definitions of what an agent is. I like the legal definition because I think we can translate that into the moment. The legal definition of an agent is a fiduciary. It has 100% responsibility to you and not to anybody else, right? This is the agent principle concept. I think we need to make sure that we build technology that represents that same principle, so that as we build this agentic economy, we are not handing over our data to a system that we have no control over and don't know what it's doing. So that's essentially what needs to be built, and there's applications for that are of value not just to individuals but to businesses as well.
Now, what are some things specifically that are wrong with the current approach? I guess that our data is owned by a big corporation.
So that's the main one, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's also it's not just that there's a threat to our privacy. That is a huge problem. But it's also the limits to which the economy can grow and take advantage of AI. So let's look at the predominant form of AI that everybody's talking about, generative AI, which is built around this idea of the large language models. These are these gigantic data ingesting machines, but there's a limit to the data that they can get access to. What they've done is get data that is quote unquote in the public domain. Obviously an enormous amount of internet data that we've all just given away unwillingly, not knowing what was at stake. Yeah. But also, some of it copyrighted data. But either way, anything that these LLMs could access, they did. What they couldn't access was an enormous amount of extremely valuable and also, I would argue, more important data for the purposes of developing solutions to the world's problems, which are sitting behind firewalls of all the companies of the world that don't want to give out that data because it's valuable to them, right? The business secrets that come with it, right? Let's think about, we're here at the New York Stock Exchange, all of the financial institutions that are trading here. Are they going to want to share their trades with a unidentified black box AI? Of course not, right? There's no way in the world that Goldman Sachs would want to have their trading activity front run by some amorphous machine that they have no control over, right? Or health data that's restricted by HIPAA rules and everything else. All of that could be extremely valuable in an AI world for the development of treatments for cancer or whatever else. It's not available to the AI systems because for very good reasons it's kept under wraps. So if we were to build a structure in which that data can be used in a verifiably private way, and there's all sorts of fascinating cryptography that allows us to run computation and draw conclusions and everything else without actually knowing the underlying data. If those models were to be built, we could unlock all of this data that's currently behind these firewalls and literally start to build useful things, right? So there's an enormous amount of opportunity and economic opportunity and I would say innovative progress that becomes possible if we take this approach.
What does the tech stack look like then behind that? Is that blockchain? Is
Good
that a DAO?
Yeah, so all of the above and more. All of these pieces come together. What's interesting, of course, is that where we're talking about transparency and openness when it comes to knowing what the models are, and we're talking about decentralized ownership of the resources, the data, and the compute, there's actually a centralizing component to this that's very important. That is that when you or the business or whomever has your agent, that's not open to the world, right? That's a centralizing process. So what this structure starts to look like is an amalgam of those ideals, right? Where do we want to centralize? Where do we want to keep it private? Where do we want to have it open? And yes, it's a complicated, multifaceted economic design, which is why the Decentralized AI Society exists. We're trying to bring everybody together to figure out what that structure should look like.
There are numerous ways that the government can leverage blockchain and AI. For example, manage public records such as birth certificates and land titles, automate social welfare programs, track government spending and goods moving through the supply chains, modernize voting systems to make them more secure, transparent, and auditable, automate and enforce regulatory compliance and tax collection, advance research and data sharing. Are any or all of these things possible with decentralized AI?
I would probably flip the question around a little bit. Like, I would say that they, whether or not they're possible or impossible with decentralized or centralized AI, I would say they have to be on decentralized AI, right? So all of them are interesting applications of varying degrees of challenge with them. I think there's clearly, value in having the verifiable records and traceability that a blockchain would enable. But if we're going to put all of that into a public domain like a blockchain, but also at the same time hand it over to a black box AI, then this is a fast route to totalitarianism, right? Like, think about all of the data that there are certain aspects of our data that we do, whether we like it or not, give to the government, right? We certainly have to share our income every year through the IRS for tax purposes, and there's certain aspects of our birth records and so forth that are shared with state authorities, but it's not something that sits in a machine that runs and computes value on us. All of that information, if I'm giving that up and there is no mechanism to verify the privacy, means that I'm handing this over to an authoritarian machine, right? I mean, this is really Black Mirror, Chinese data score. This is starting to feel a little bit like the 1930s in Germany, right? Like, this is not good. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't think about government efficiency and do this. I've been advocating for many years that we could bring a lot of the spirit of blockchain to make governments more effective and more efficient, but mixing it with AI, yes, would create efficiency, but would create massive problems for our rights as citizens.
Yeah.
So, the question is, should we do it with decentralized AI? For which the answer is absolutely 100% yes.
Yeah. Would financial incentives play a role in incentivizing decentralized AI?
I mean, financial incentives always play a role, right? I think incentivization is, again, those of us who've been following, and I know you've been following blockchain for a long time, Jane, I think that's one of the things that has got a lot of us interested for some time, and the idea that, one of the great problems we have with the existing centralized system of capitalism is that the incentives have become misaligned. It's not to say that capitalism is bad, it's just that under the model that emerged in Web 2, there was a disconnect between the big platforms' profit interests and what they were incentivized to do and what was our interests, right? There's this famous line that Bruce Schneier came up with that we were not Facebook's customer, we were Facebook's product, right? That is not the way the world should be. So we really, yes, absolutely should be thinking hard about what are the financial, monetary, economic profit incentives that are baked into the systems so that we collectively as humanity are all participating with an alignment with what the businesses who are developing this, and I just don't believe that that's what we currently have.
Yeah. Do you think, would Bitcoin be a good example of
That's another very good question. So I wouldn't say it's an example of decentralization per se when it comes to AI. What it is a thought experiment about what would be the currency that a world of machines trading with each other would look like. Right? Do they want the dollar? Or if you're going to run this through an AI and say what would be an ideal currency for a fully non-national, multinational, international, global network of machines, I kind of guess the machines might say, I think Bitcoin's a better bet, right? Like, I'm not saying this is a Bitcoin, maxi or anything. I'm just simply saying I don't know that machines are going to want all of the political problems of a national currency to be embedded into their exchanges. This is not to say that that's what's going to happen immediately. I would think that there'll be, stable coins and things like this are going to be the first aspect of machine-to-machine payments, because that's what's entrenched in our economy. But as a thought experiment, I could imagine a world in which it would all actually end up being Bitcoin or some other version of a cryptocurrency, to sort of like allow for something that every machine feels they can trust, right?
Now, what's your pitch to the government then about this? I guess it would have to be involved in this, and tech leaders as well.
So I would advise governments who are who are interested and concerned about the welfare of their citizens to make this the biggest and most highest priority that they would make as they barrel their way into this rather dangerous environment. I think that there's a real opportunity for anybody that wants to differentiate themselves and stand up for a new way of thinking about the role of government to hold up the value of the citizen, some of the principles upon which this country was built, right? The founding of this country were about the primacy of the human being, the primacy of the individual. If we give people control over their data and the right to determine where it goes, and a new set of business models that get built around that provably human and provably valuable human data, there's an explosion of wealth that is possible. We've seen throughout history moments in which the transfer of property rights from a small group to a wider group have often, in fact nearly always, led to a vast improvement in innovation and a big explosion of wealth. We saw it in China when Deng Xiaoping gave Chinese the right to own their homes. We saw it in the turn of the 16th century when in Netherlands they invented the limited stock company. These ideas have always been built upon the transfer to a wider class of people the idea of a property right. And what we're talking about with data is a kind of an amalgam of a human right and a property right. So it's a very progressive idea if you want to think about what kind of politicians might want to get onto this, but it sounds nothing like what progressive politics have sounded like until now. This is a very different way of focusing on what should be done for humanity.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention and the public's attention. Always great to talk to you.
Likewise, Jen.
Thank you so much for
Thanks
joining
for
us.
me.
Well, this episode of Business of Blockchain was sponsored by BitDeer. I'm Jane King at the New York Stock Exchange.